everyone, Clack the Geek here. Welcome back to another video. Today, we are going inside number 9 again. That was a terrible joke. Anyway, yeah, we are covering Inside number 9 again. Now, I haven't covered Inside number 9 on the channel since Series 6 ended last year. So, for a little recap for those who forgot, Inside number 9 is the dark comedy / anthology show on BBC Two, created by Steve Pemberton and Reece Shearsmith, 50% of the League of Gentlemen. And each episode is its own, standalone story, different settings, different characters, usually with a big guest stars appearing, all revolving around a number 9. So this could be, a house number 9, a flat number 9, or something as obscure as a TV show called The Ninth Circle. They tend to be fairly small-scale stories, small scale, small cast, small settings. But other than that, they're very free to do what they want, and this is why number 9, other than Doctor Who, is probably my favourite show that there is. I just love it. The different kinds of stories that can be told, the endless creativity that is here is brilliant. And I mean, we've got a 7th series, Series 7 has just started the other day, and that ignited my love for the show again. I mean, I just want to talk about all the episodes and give my thoughts, because there's so much to talk about. So I thought, let's start covering each series I haven't covered. So I did Series 6 when it came out. Let's cover Series 1 to 5. So we're going to start with Series 1. So yeah, Series 1, the show's humble beginnings. And you can kind of tell, it's probably one of the weaker series of the show. Purely, I mean, it's still brilliant. It's still brilliant stuff. But you can tell with specific episodes they are finding their feet. It's very obvious, and they are trying to find out what they want. But this series still has some absolute classics and also some really underrated gems that I, want to give a more positive look on. So without further ado, let's get to it. And I'm going to kind of try and keep it spoiler free for the most part. I will let you know, and I'll just say skip to the next bit, but I'm going to try and keep it relatively spoiler free. So episode 1, Sardines, the introduction to number 9, and in my opinion, it does kind of suffer from first episode syndrome. It very much feels, it doesn't feel like they fully know what they want the show to be. It is kind of, as an opener, I don't think it works well as an opener. I think there are plenty of other episodes that you could show a newcomer to the show before this. And since it's an anthology, you don't have to watch it in order. So there's plenty of episodes that I'd go to before this one. The premise is basically an engagement party at this upper-class family where they're playing a game of sardines, which is essentially like hide and seek, but once you find where people are hiding, you have to hide with them, and you hide in the same place like sardines. It's usually a game played by children, but here it's been played by upper class adults. It's a really absurd concept. I couldn't fully buy into it this time, but it was still quite funny and really amusing at times. It was quite a funny concept. I also thought some of the actors were really funny. Anne Reid, I thought, was probably my favourite. She was just really funny with some of the things she was coming out with, and Reece Shearsmith got to camp it up in this episode, which is a bit different from what you usually see from him, so that was quite good. And some of the others were quite funny. Stinky John, he was good. I think Mark Watton, I think the actor, but yeah, I thought he was quite funny as well. But yeah, it does kind of feel like it doesn't fully know where the show wants to go at this point, because you've got this very absurd concept, as you say, and it was, it is funny concept, but them trying to, do this thing of, trying to create a claustrophobic atmosphere to kind of create some, tension, it feels too forced. It feels too unnatural of a concept to try and get across a claustrophobic atmosphere. I think there's other episodes which do that much more organically. Even in this very series, I think there's other ones that, it's very simple settings, but they managed to make it claustrophobic, and I think they work better than this. It just feels too unnatural. I don't think it worked well. I do think there are too many characters, and while the actors were really good, you had great actors, Anne Reid, Mark Watton, Catherine Parkinson, etc., Timothy West, they were great actors, but I couldn't really, because there were so many characters, I couldn't really connect with a single one. That's kind of a problem for me. And at the end, there were some dark revelations about some of the family's past, and some potential child abuse kind of thing, but I think it's brought up a bit too late into the episode. It should have been built up a bit better. So I'm going to give this episode a 7 out of 10. It's still a good episode, I still enjoy it, but it's personally my least favourite of the series, and it's where kind of their inexperience with the show kind of shows the most, I think. Episode 2 now, and we've got hands down the best of the season, in my opinion, A Quiet Night In. This one is a classic, and it really brought number 9 to, show that they can do really experimental storytelling. And this episode, up until the very, very end, has no dialogue. It's almost like a modern silent film. They're still like diegetic sound, but it's purely told through visuals, and it is absolutely brilliant. Dialogue can be a double-edged sword. Like if it's written well, it can be great, but if it's not written well, it can just really crumble a story. But this story, it's so unique, and it's the way that they managed to make it almost like it's more comedic, and the visual comedy, the physical comedy that Shearsmith and Pemberton give us, it's just absolutely hysterical. The premise of the episode is that there's these two thieves trying to steal this painting from this wealthy mansion owned by a character played by Dennis Lawson, who was in the original Star Wars films, which it was great to see him still acting. That's great. But the visual gags that you get, like at the beginning when Dennis Lawson's character is just eating his dinner and Steve's character is just like playing with a broom just to turn the outside light off, is brilliant. Or when they find the painting, they make a substitute out of like kitchen roll and a post-it note. It's just like, because it's just a white, essentially that painting is just a white sheet with a yellow square in it. It's like, this something so simple is worth a lot of money to people. It's quite absurd. Or what about when the best one, I think, is when Steve's character is caught by the housemaid. He's got pepper spray in his eye and tries to find some cucumber to cut it to like cool his eyes down. Accidentally grabs a chili and sticks it in his eyes. And that visual gag is never leaving my brain. This has got to be the funniest number 9 episode. And knowing their history in comedy, that's saying a lot. But I also quite like the whole plot line of Dennis Lawson's character and his relationship with the person he's with, and then how dark that ends up getting. And it's just like simultaneously with that and this whole robbery thing, it's great. And then also at the end, the Paul character, what happens with him and who he turns out to be. It's quite shocking in the moment, but then it's absolutely hilarious. Honest, it's just this episode is just a bloody amazing one. I'm giving it a 10. It's the best of the season, and I used to say this is the one to start with if you're new to number 9, but I showed this to my parents to get them into the show, and they hated it, so they're never watching it again. So maybe don't show this one at first, but I adore this one. Episode 3 now, and we have what I think was my first episode, or if not one of my first episodes, Tom and Jerry, another bona fide classic. This one's kind of a blend of like kitchen sink drama with a bit of a psychological like horror edge to it, and again, as I said, it's another classic episode. So if it starts off fairly normal, you've got Tom, a primary school teacher played by Shearsmith, and you've got Jerry, an actress played by Gemma Arterton, and it starts off fairly normal, and then they spot a homeless man on the street, Mig, played by Pemberton, but when Jerry leaves, it's when Tom meets Mig, and like Mig ends up in the flat. He's invited in due to Tom's like good nature, and slowly throughout the episode you see how Mig is kind of manipulating Tom and using him just to get food, drink, and then like manipulates him. So Mig ends up by the end of the episode like more articulate, more formal, and then Tom is just a crippled mess by the end. He's not shaved, he doesn't go out, he doesn't leave. By the end of the episode, there's no power in the house. It's been cut off because they haven't paid the bills. They've just not left the flat. It's just, it's a brilliant episode. It is quite relevant watching this now, after the pandemic and the isolation stuff. Even though this came out like 6 years before the pandemic started, it is quite relevant now. But I think this story achieves that claustrophobia really well. It's just a simple flat, but it's really creepy. They don't wash up. It ends up just building and growing more horrible. The flat is like no washing. It's just like it manages to capture that feeling of unease really well, really organically from something as simple as a flat. And it's the way it's done, which is brilliant. There's some great performances from all of the cast. Steve and Reese managed to. They obviously changed throughout the episode from the beginning to the end. They're completely different people essentially, and they managed to show that range and that transition essentially throughout. It's really well done stuff. And I will give a spoiler warning here because this is where I'm going to get onto the big twist, because it's the first number 9 to have a properly big twist. it's sort of playing with the expectation that, you know, Mig might be in Tom's imagination and Gerri's there to comfort him and say, just get rid of this Mig out of your mind. But then it pulls another layer under from you, that Gerri was the one that's dead, that she died in a car crash months ago, and Mig is actually real, and Tom's just gone and killed Mig in the bath. And like Gerri's just a part of Tom's imagination, just to cope with the grief, and it's such a dark ending, and it's such a brilliant twist. So this gets a 9 out of 10, a very strong 9, I should say. It's very close to a 10, I gotta say. Episode 4 now, and here we have one of the least popular episodes of the show, Last Gasp. And I can kind of see why. It does have that kind of thing that Sardines does, of it doesn't feel like they fully know where they want to go with the show at this point. So the plot of this one is really absurd. It's based on those kind of Make-A-Wish foundations where it's like you get a celebrity to visit a, you know, sick child, making their wish come true, that kind of thing. You got a pop singer who visits a very ill child on their birthday, an ill little girl on their birthday, and the singer dies in their room whilst blowing up a balloon, and their last gasp is inside the balloon. So then all the adults are squabbling over like the you know, like selling it and getting equal shares and all that on a frigging balloon. It's such an absurd plot, but it is kind of funny again, and it is kind of sadistic in that sense. I do prefer it to Sardines a little bit. However, as funny as the premise is, and I think it is quite good, and I like how it's a bit lighter, and I like it, but it does mean the pacing in the episode is a problem, because a lot of it is them, especially in the middle, they're just sitting around discussing and just waiting around for the ambulance to come, and it's just, yeah, it is a bit, the pacing isn't great here. Another qualm with the episode is that people tend to have is there's no Reese. You know, Reese isn't in this episode, it's just Pemberton in this episode. And I don't think that's inherently a bad thing, but here I don't think it fully works because Steve doesn't really have a particular cast member to play off. I think all the adult characters just tend to, they almost like blend together as like a collective. They're not able to bounce off each other. And Pemberton and Shearsmith are a phenomenal double act. So it is kind of a shame when you can't really have, you know, I don't necessarily mind it in principle, but I just think you've got to have at least a character or an actor for them to play off well. Speaking of actors, you've got Tamsin Greig, you know, Jackie from Friday Night Dinner, and she's the standout of the cast. She's very sadistic, very, you know, like quite horrible, but like she plays it really well. She's really great. I also quite like the stuff with Tamsin, you know, and her, you know, having to face her mortality, and essentially she's more mature than the adults, you know, and she's saying things like, how many more birthdays will I have? Like that's a really touching thing, and I really felt for her. I think she's a really very sweet character. I'm also going to give the episode a 7 out of 10, but I do prefer it to Sardines a little bit, just because I think I enjoyed it more on this watch, and I think I was able to go with it. It's a lighter episode, but I went with it this time. Episode 5, The Understudy. Now, this is one that I find really underrated, and I think is going to become a comfort episode of mine. So this episode takes place backstage of a theatre production of Macbeth, with Steve Pemberton playing a famous actor who portrays Macbeth in the show, and Reese plays his understudy. For those who don't know, an understudy is somebody who covers for an actor if they are unable to perform on a particular night. Say that they're sick, that's when the understudy will come in and perform on that night. So they have to learn the lines, they have to go to the auditions and rehearsals and whatnot, but if they're not needed, it's just a thankless job. They're not needed, you know. So it really shines a light on a part of acting and part of theatre and a job that's just really unrecognised. I also love how the events of the episode mimic the play of Macbeth. You know, it takes place with a 5-act structure. Reese's character is very much the Macbeth character. You know, he's in the wings, and he's essentially, you know, obviously an understudy for Steve's actor character, in the same way that Macbeth is an understudy kind of for the king. You know, he takes on the mantle of king when Duncan dies. Spoilers for a play that's like 400 years old. Anyway, yeah, it's really clever how that mimics it, and how, you know, his girlfriend is also kind of like Lady Macbeth, kind of egging him on to be more ambitious. And also, spoilers, but later in the episode, Kirsty, who's one of the stage assistants, she reveals that she was kind of behind it all, and she's kind of like represents like the witches, almost like supernatural kind of. It's not supernatural in here, but it kind of represents that. It's really cleverly done, and you know, she plays that kind of like secret admirer gone a bit too far really well, and I think the actor who played her, she was really good. She was in an episode of Friday Night Dinner, and I didn't like her in that one, but she was great in this. The only real thing I can criticise is the really poor looking CGI blood. I mean, I know it's not got a massive budget, but that was like the only real gripe I had with the episode. But overall, I really love this episode. And you know what? It's probably because I've performed in a production of Macbeth. So that's maybe why. But I really have a soft spot for it looking at it now, and more so than when I watched it the first time. So I'm going to give it a 9. It's a very light 9 out of 10, but I really enjoy this one. I can't help, I just do, and I think it's really underrated. And now episode 6, the final episode of the season, The Harrowing. Very much a pure kind of horror affair, very kind of Hammer horror inspired by stuff like, Christopher Lee Dracula, that kind of Hammer horror vibe. And this episode lives up to the title because it is harrowing. This episode is also a bit odd in the sense that, like last Gasp, it doesn't have the two main actors. Steve isn't in this one, but it's just Reese. I think it works here, though, because alongside Reese, you've got the late, great Helen McCrory, who we can really... They both play with each other so well. They have great chemistry as, like, these two siblings, these two odd siblings with weird fascinations, and they perform it so well. Reese is really, being a bit more... I don't want to say camp, because that would undersell it, because he gives a fantastic, quite creepy performance, but he seems to be having a lot of fun, very much relishing in the part, and Helen McCrory is more subdued in her performance, but they're still great, they're still absolutely ace. The plot of the episode is about this teenager, Katie, who's been asked to house sit their old gothic house, whilst the two siblings, played by McCrory and Shearsmith, they go out for an event, and also to look after their disabled brother, Andros. And that's kind of all I can really reveal, but it is a great piece. The atmosphere, the set of the house is great. The atmosphere is really chilling. The musical score, I haven't really mentioned the music, but the music in this one is fantastic. It's got a real synthy, classic horror vibe, like something like you'd see in A Nightmare on Elm Street, like a 80s kind of horror movie. It's got that synthy, vibe to it, and it's really effective. But in this section of the episode, when Katie is alone in the house with her friend and they're seeing all the demonic paintings, there's lines, now that I know what happens, I'm just thinking, oh, the irony of that. Yeah, it just kind of makes you cringe in a way, because it makes you really uncomfortable because you know what's going to happen now. That's the joy of number 9. You come back to it and it just gets better and better. I'm going to get into a bit of spoiler talk now, but with regards to who Andros is, because it turns out he's got a demon inside of him, and the two siblings, Hector and Tabitha, want to transfer the demon's soul into Katie's body for her to house for the next 50 years. And it's a really just horrible ending. It's really disturbing, really scary. The makeup effects on Andros is just gross, and it's brilliant. And it does help with the atmosphere of the horror atmosphere. Watching this at 10 o'clock at night, it really does help get that scary, spooky feel. It is more traditionally scary in more horror sense, and not as disturbing or psychological, but it still gets a 9 out of 10 from me. Another really underrated one, and I think this is a cracking episode. So that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and here's a little ranking of all the episodes, with A Quiet Night In being head and shoulders the best in my opinion, and Sardines being at the bottom in my opinion, and everything in between, obviously. So hope you enjoyed it. Please discuss, comment all your thoughts on these episodes and the series in the comments below. I will say though, please make it if you're going to talk about spoilers, do kind of make it aware because I know not everybody who watches this video will have seen number 9, so my objective is to encourage people to watch it. So you can talk spoiler, but just make it obvious that you're talking spoilers if you are. So yeah. Anyway, like, subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss a thing, and this Clack of the Geek signing out. Goodbye, everyone.